Mann, leading Emmy, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to Emmy TV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
What's up, everybody in the building, ready to get some things done, more solutions for the people. I just wanted to, first of all, give a shout out to God for making everything possible. And so today we got in the building my friend and brother, George Ward.
Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And my friend and brother, Good Fathers Only member, soldier, Dave, Dr. Dave, soon to be Dr. Dave Patterson.
Good evening.
And I wanted my Be Me brother to come on in Pittsburgh, but he couldn't make it. And we're going to jump right into this conversation because we find it very important to discuss solutions. And a lot of times we like to wallow in some of them other things that has nothing to do with solving the problems of the community, of the male anatomy, right? So we're back with part 2 on how do we solve some of these issues. So, gentlemen, George Ward, coach, known you for years, my brother, my family. We've been around for a while, doing great things. George been in it for a long time, coaching, changing lives, making a difference in men's lives. And I had to have him in. He's very, very passionate himself about what he's seeing. And we find ourselves, right, trying to figure out, what's that deal? How do we fix this, right? We talking about family, but now you hear the conversation is about how family is no good.
Wow.
Right? And when that falls on who, right? I mean, are we leaning into this dynamic, right? So last week we got it in real good. And so, George, I'm going to come to you first. We're going to kick this off with some gun violence, right?
There we go.
So my friend and brother in Pittsburgh, my Be Me brother, Rashad Byrdsong, lost a family member, right, to gun violence. And oftentimes we see the narrative a different way. But let's run through a couple of quick ticks and I'm going to come right to you, George, right? Number 2 way a black kid is killed, guns. Just in the last, I say 30 years, over 300,000 males. Those are all headed by, males. We're talking males, fathers, potential uncles, brothers, right?
That's right.
Right? Then let's look at, when we talk about gun violence, we talk about those who survived it. Bullet wounds, right? Bullet wounds and incarceration rate. So gun violence is a big issue. We like to put it off on racism, right? I'm going to put it off on some truth, right? Let's get to some real truth. So, George, your take on gun violence is very important. So I'm here and I'm listening.
When you talk about gun violence in our community, obviously it's been hampering us for years now. But we got to look at how our young men respond to everything. I said, let's get to the core of what's going on. Guns have been around for a long time, obviously, but as the years go by, the gun violence is more and more prevalent, and we got to respond. We got to think as the leaders in the community. I'm talking about men, adults, female or male, but males are the leaders of the community, supposed to be. How are our young men responding to disappointment, neglect, abandonment, whatever the case may be, or simply rejection? They're responding to it with violence, and they're responding to it with guns. And when you look at the lack of respect that one has for his own life, one for his family's life, when you look at that sort of disrespect and the inability to handle emotions, that is truly grounds for a disaster. And that's what we're looking at right now. So yes, the gun violence has been so ridiculous in our community that we got to really address it. But the emotions of our young men. We see them every day, and all of us deal with our young people. But if you're looking at grown men, 40, 50 years old, they're shooting one another out of road rage and things like that. If the girlfriend or the wife no longer wants you, how did it become an option to kill someone? How did it become an option for us to go to a gun? So we got to do a better job with handling ourselves and handling our emotions, especially when it comes to gun and gang violence.
Man, like, yeah, that's a new way, isn't it? It's called murder-suicide, right? They developed a whole new way of, addressing and attacking. And again, if there's some things that we want to change, all we have to do is come together and change them.
Indeed.
The male is a very powerful species, but if we use it in the wrong way, like you were saying, Dave, you've seen it. You've seen it up close, right?
Yes.
You've seen it from being in the military and everything. That gun violence, what is it saying to you?
Well, one of the things I think that's significant is that you have to have identity. And we have identified ourselves with the media and how it perpetuates violence. They have desensitized the whole concept of violence. And so our men, if you will, I mean, when I was growing up, it was you wanted to be a cowboy because that's what we saw. So the media has now taken the concept of violence and glorified it. So
Right.
they have desensitized the whole interaction of human relations. So I think that in order for us to really be able to help our young men, we have to give them identity. And George said something that's really significant. It's about that emotional intelligence. Many of us really don't understand that. And the first thing about emotional intelligence is that you have to have self-awareness. Well, if you don't know who you are, how are you going to be able to help someone else or even acknowledge someone else when you don't even have an identity to yourself? So we see our young people today, we have all, and I'm not discrediting the young rappers and the shows we see, the Empire, Power. If you look at that, everything is desensitized about human interaction. So therefore, when you see the young men acting out, what you have is an inner anger, not inner anger, I should say inner hatred, inner disappointment, inner frustration, irritability that moves itself in an outward manifestation. Well, if I've given you, your solution is to get weapons and take out what you think has done you a disservice, then at that point, violence becomes the norm. And that's what we have done. We have allowed violence to become the norm. And until we teach a self-identity, with our young men, they're going to struggle. And again, these are just outward behaviors from inner struggles that people have. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, but because that goes, Dave, right? Again, what are you being taught? What are you glorified, right? So society plays a part as well. Dr. Warren Farrell says, men have been dying to be heroes. You have constructed a whole anatomy, right, to where he is only validated if he dies. What's up, big fella?
What's up, my brothers? How y'all doing this evening?
All right, brother.
What's good, brother? How you doing?
So, man, first of all, man, you getting ready to change this whole room. So, before you change it, man, thank you for coming on. Sorry about your loss. We talked about gun violence, and I wanted your perspective when you tagged me into that post. I don't know if you really know the whole story, but I started Encourage Me, I'm Young by laying shirts where kids was getting killed. So over 200 and, over 630 kids. First it was my nephew, last it was my niece. I witnessed it up close and personal. So I understood exactly where you was at, and I think that's what is empowering this conversation in here today, as well as us solving the problem. So that's what we do on this podcast. So I just want to give you this moment, share what you got to share, and we're going to jump right in with you.
Sure. First of all, I'm sure that the brothers that's on the show tonight and also your listening audience know that, the whole fratricide and menticide of young Black boys have intensified over the last, I would say, 25 years.
Indeed.
And brothers my age, I remember coming up in a community where you had strong Black men, whether it was your father, your uncle, your cousins, the ministers, social club. that was responsible for the child rearing of black boys. And even today, we know that rites of passage programs can assist in the whole educational and development of black boys. I think, unfortunately, what has happened while we have seen an increase in gun violence and homicides and murders in the black community is because the whole family functioning system, have become compromised. Number one, we depend too much on other people to raise our children. We depend, on systems to feed us and to clothe us. I remember when I was young, we didn't have a lot of these here systems. It was the church, it was the temple, it was the masjid, and it was family systems. So I think when we gave up the whole culture of how families is the first educators and teachers and protectors of the children, then that's when we start letting our young people fend for themselves. I've been involved for close to 50 years now in this movement, former member of the Black Panther Party. And within the last 25 years, I was part of what was called the Urban Peace and Justice Movement. We did like 15 summits throughout the country, convening initially in Kansas City, 500 delegates from all over the country convened in Kansas City in 1993. And the objective by us convening is developing a model, an anti-violence model. And it wasn't a model, a law enforcement model, because you can't arrest ourselves out of this here. It was a model that addressed mental health. It was a model that addressed education, and it had a strong manhood training piece to that also. Unfortunately, there's a lot of black men that's absent from the home. And that's for a lot of reasons, whether it's through chemical warfare, drugs, whether it's mental health, whether it's incarceration. So the men is not in the home, unfortunately. And
So
also we see there's a lot of fragmentation. Our community is disjointed and fragmented. And of course, that's for a lot of other reasons also. A lot of us are still in our silos. We can't get past our religion differences, social differences, cultural differences, in order to work with one another. So given, all of those things, determinants, some of the things that we see as necessary to do is also look at the root rather than scratching on the surface what the problem is in our community around the murders of young black boys. We understand there's a root problem to that also. So in addition to bringing relief to our community, when I say relief, we still got a lot of families that's stuck in concentrated poverty. We still got a lot of families don't have the necessary resources to raise their children. We got a lot of young, single-headed home sisters that's trying to raise boys without men. So there's a lot of social issues that's impacting the family. And you have black communities that get multi millions of dollars that's coming through nonprofits, but unfortunately, some of the models of intervention and prevention is not working for our community. So we have to have a new conversation about how to address these young men. We got to talk about the level of weaponry in our community, these type of military automatic weapons that 13 and 14 and 15-year-old boys are having. We got to talk about, young men that's not involved, engaged in the school experience. A lot of these young boys that's dying, they should be having them behind in school. They're not in school. So a piece that I did, you might have saw, I put out called "Who's at the Switch." I mean, who's really responsible, for these children? And we can't always be blaming the mother. I see there's a lot of hits sometimes that blames the mother
No.
in the family because you can do the best that you can to raise your kids, but then sometimes they come up under the influence of the music. Uh, Social media play a very instrumental part in terms of young people, peers. So this is a big elephant in the room, and I know brothers all over the country, and all of them is saying that these are some issues they dealing with. I know brothers in Chicago, same thing, brothers in Cleveland, and Los Angeles, and all of them is saying that there's been increase in homicides in their community and in their state. So I think that what we have to do, brothers, is there have to be a conversation outside the box. We've been talking about this for a while, but unfortunately, traditional systems have swept us under the rug,
Yep.
and our children are dying. So this is a conversation that we have to make sure we have to be a national conversation throughout the country. How can we begin to save Black boys? And lastly, over the last 25 years, my organization was birthed out of what we're talking about now. The first juvenile, gangs here in Pittsburgh was around 1992, 93. The crack cocaine had came into the city around 1988. So between the crack cocaine and this here juvenile gang culture, intersect with one another, and that's what we see today. A lot of young boys got caught up in the underground economy, the drugs, in order to get money and jobs. So one of the things we did in 1992, 93 rather, founding the organization, and we started talking about workforce development and training. A lot of young boys need vocational skills. They have taken them out to schools. I'm sure y'all remember when they had tin shop, metal shop, auto shop,
Oh yeah.
and all these things that was a school.
Yeah.
They no longer have that.
That's
We
right.
also see from the schoolyard to the prison pipeline. I mean, the type of disciplinary measures that the schools is using to put these here young boys in juvenile homes and these type of homes where they get a record where they can't get their license. So then you got a lot of these young men going to jail at 16, 17, 18, coming out when they're close to 30 to the same type of communities that they went in. So
Worse.
there's a lot of things going on in our community that we have to address. So those are some of the questions and some of the answers that we got to try to seek and try to save lives in our various communities throughout the country.
Okay, so in that process, right? So we're on the solution base, right? So because that was a excellent point across the board because that's where we was before you even got in. You like hit on everything we were talking about. So when you get a chance, I want all you guys to go take a look at the 1965 Juvenile Act. I just want you to go look at that, the 1965 Juvenile Act. When you look at the Juvenile Act, you're going to see some things that will spook you. Policy-wise, we're not in the game. So if we're not in the game, we're not changing no policies, right? And so to answer that, if everything that you just said, Brother Rashad, is directly connected to healthy fatherhood.
Mhm.
If we apply healthy fatherhood, if we begin to value fatherhood in our communities again, right, then you begin to shift. Even in our mentoring program, we use fathers. It takes 12 mentors to equal one father. You want to impact a boy's life. The first thing before you walked into that building, Brother Rashad, was you were a dad. So you're going to apply some different tools versus someone who doesn't have any kids at all. This is and just a mentor. That's one thing. But when you have kids, that's a different fabric. You have a different understanding. And you use that. Coach, military, right? your position, we use that fatherhood in how we're addressing and teaching and molding and shaping lives.